Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And like I mentioned in my true crime recap that went live today, I am going to be talking about 3 more unidentifieds that have been identified. So the first one we're going to be talking about is that of the King County John Doe. Remains were found on 3 different occasions at a beach at Discovery Park in Seattle, Washington on December 23rd, 2017, January 22nd, 2018, and January 25th, 2018. So in December, which was the primary discovery, was that of a hand. The second discovery in January was that of a leg, and then the torso was found less than a month later. There would also be some shoes that showed up as well that were black and gold Air Jordans. The third discovery was that of a foot that showed up just 3 days after the secondary finding. So a lot of body parts everywhere. The shoes were that of a size 10, but that wasn't helpful to investigators because, I mean, a lot of people wear a size 10 sneaker. An autopsy was conducted and a few things were estimated. The height of this male they thought was between 5'8" and 5'11". They thought he was between the ages of 30 to 60 and that this male died in either 2016 or 2017. There was a forensic reconstruction of this male created, but unfortunately it just delayed the inevitable and this male wasn't identified. His information was then entered into NamUs as UP17874. So this year, in 2023, the Seattle Police Department took the forensics and submitted it to Othram. They then were able to determine some potential family members and cross-reference DNA. There was a match, and the King County John Doe was identified as that of Paul J. Bossart, Jr. He was 33 years old, who was from Illinois. So his family knew that he left home in November of 2017 with the hopes of relocating to Seattle, and his family never heard from him again. If you or anyone you know has any information in regards to this John Doe, please contact the Seattle Police Department at 206-684-5555, and please use the reference number for this case of 2017-471235. So our next one we're going to talk about is the Montgomery County John Doe. So the Montgomery County John Doe was identified on December 7th of this year. He died from a gunshot wound 37 years ago. He was identified as that of Clarence Wilson, who was 34 years old at the time of his death, and he was found on August 3rd of 1996 in Conroe, Texas. So his body was found in Crater Lake. He was weighed down with cinder blocks that had been tied to his body by electrical tape. This John Doe was known as New York Billy. This case is still being worked on at this time, so there's not a lot of information for him other than he was identified via genetics. So the next one we're going to discuss is the Fairfield County Jane Doe. Skull of a woman was found on September 14th of 1994 in a stream in Darien, Connecticut, near the I-95 or Interstate 95. This skull was found by 2 teenage boys who were in the woods, probably just hanging around, when they stumbled upon this. It would be determined that this was a Caucasian female around the ages of 40 to 50. It was approximated that she died up to 10 years prior to being found, so she had been deceased for quite some time. There was nothing to be found other than the skull to help aid in any identification. So in 2015, the case is entered into NamUs as UP14546. There would be some leads, but the case went cold. That was until the help of Othram and aiding the cold cases in Connecticut, they were able to use genetic forensics and in fact deemed that this was Patricia Hall, who was born back on June 4th of 1962. Just like the case of Clarence Wilson, this case is still ongoing as well. So last one we're going to talk about is the 1981 Pacific Beach Jane Doe, aka she was also known as Bag Lady. So back on October 16th of 1981, the body of a woman was discovered in San Diego behind a office supply store on 1753 Garnet Ave. This female had been beaten, stabbed, and she was set on fire. This woman was stabbed in the neck and what was more odd is that she was naked from the waist down, which is kind of weird. So they believe that she was sexually assaulted. They thought that they would be able to identify her due to people seeing her in the area every day in that exact location, but alas, they wouldn't be able to tell them who she was except for Bag Lady. The reason being is obviously she was a transient, and they really just knew her as Bag Lady. They didn't know her name because the residents in the area saw her in the Pacific Beach area. That was it. Her case would eventually be uploaded into NamUs in the database of UP11737. This woman would lay unidentified for 42 years until it was publicly announced on December 8th that this was Elaine Rose Armstrong, who was approximately 51 at the time of her death. Elaine was missing from Kalamazoo, Michigan. This case would not have gained the momentum it needed for the identification of this Jane Doe if it wasn't for Othram and the San Diego District Attorney's Office. Donald H. Kirk's remains were found near Boynton Beach, Florida in the ocean back in September on the 7th of 2003. His remains were found about 5 miles east of the beach. The oddity of this case is that Donald Kirk was actually reported missing on September 15th, and he was found on the 7th. So he was reported missing 8 days after he was found. He was given the moniker of Maritime John Doe. The remains were found with a tattoo of an eagle, and that had an anchor, and either the indication that he was a seaman of the Navy or he was a Marine in his life. He was wearing khaki pants, brown socks, a polo shirt that had white with black and brown pinstripes, and a white t-shirt underneath. His case was added to NamUs in 2008 as UP1037, and a forensic sketch was developed to help people understand that what he may have looked like. This was then spread around social media. The case was also featured on the Lead podcast in hopes something would come of the highlight of this case, but unfortunately nothing did. There wouldn't be a break in this case until the use of genetics, which happens with most of them. They were able to come into contact with a potential relative of his, and they were able to complete a comparison of DNA. So they were able to establish who this was with kin SNP rapid relationship familial testing. And the Maritime John Doe was identified as that of Donald H. Kirk, who was born back on July 18th of 1927. He was 76 years old at the time of his death. So that, my friends, is quite a few John and Jane Doe cases that have been identified as of this week. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode of Vlogmas. Bye, guys.